But what's not often said is that Palestine, the West Bank, is beautiful. When you drive along the roads or go walk along the roads, you see the terraced hillsides in the rougher parts. You see the white bands of stone, the native stone, that separate them, and all the plants that they've planted along up these terraces. And the way they live in their houses and on the land, I think, is very beautiful. They start at the bottom of the hill, and then the houses, in an irregular way, these stone houses with their flat roofs, they work up the hill part way and then fade away. There are olive trees, there are sheep grazing, and there's a lot of green. It's very beautiful. Picture an evening in October, say, in the north of the West Bank, in Jenin, and where I was sitting one evening with the family that I was staying with, up on a slight hill, and far beyond us we could see entire Jenin refugee camp. Then imagine that along the road that goes below the camp and all alongside it, they call it the Haifa Road, because all the people from Jenin came originally from Haifa. Along come these black, armored, look-alike jeeps made by Ford, automated armored bulldozers, big, huge backhoes that have arms that can reach up and tear down the electric lines and reach 6 feet down into the earth and tear up the water lines, which they do. First we see this line going into the camp, and then we begin to hear the shooting from the soldiers. And in response, we hear a lighter tapping of the guns of the resistance. The young men in their 20s and 30s who are resisting these soldiers coming in, abducting people, killing people, destroying their houses, barreling holes in the sides of buildings, climbing through, taking over the houses, kicking out the people, shooting from their windows. This happens regularly now for the last 4 years or so. In 2002, Israel occupied the entire West Bank, but they haven't done anything like that. They didn't do anything like that for many years, but about 4 years ago, they started coming in, and picking especially Jenin, because, as you heard, the resistance has always been strong there. I have to say, I have never seen resistance fighters dressed like that. I've never seen them with green bands on their heads. I've certainly never seen them with uniforms. That might have been a long time ago. They don't have them now. I used to meet them in the camp. They were always really courteous to me and friendly. When they got to know me, then they'd wave as they drove by on their Vespas with their guns over their shoulders. They were the kids of the camp before. So at this time, Netanyahu has said that he wants to redraw the map of the Middle East, so-called, and he is beginning to do it. His military has not left Lebanon, and they are not allowing people to go back to their homes and find their dead relatives. And now they have their troops and their tanks in Syria. And of course, we all know what's still happening in Gaza. But in the West Bank, this is relatively new. And they're beginning in the north with Jenin, Tulkarem, especially in the refugee camps, because there's where people are the poorest and have the least, and so the least to lose when they resist. And those are the places that the Israeli military always come and attack. Just make a beeline for the camps. In Jenin, there was a camp. They mentioned 24,000 in this film. There were 17,000 or so when I was there in this fall and winter, this last fall and winter. They have now evicted, cast out, at gunpoint, 15,000 of the 17,000 residents of Jenin refugee camp. People were not allowed to take anything. They were at gunpoint. They were told to get out, take nothing, not a paper, not a pamper, not a food for kids, nothing. And you can see films of them walking up the roads with nothing but their babies in their arms or their children by their hands. They've scattered over something like 38 villages now. Some have family, many people. The reason there were not 24,000 when I went was that many people have already left. Anybody who could afford to has been moving out of the camp, like the family that I stayed with in 2002. They were living in the camp, and I lived with them that first time for 3 months, but they knew that they had 2 small kids and a third on the way, and they were afraid to stay there. So they moved a little bit outside, just to the hospital that was right on the edge of the camp. And they got an apartment there. And they lived there for a while until they realized that the soldiers kept coming. And when they came, the soldiers thought it was really fun to hang out on the gallery, on the porch of the hospital and shoot people who walked by. So they moved again at great expense and help from their families up a little bit higher on the hill where we were sitting that night that I described to you. When actually a few days after they had moved up, a neighbor called who was still living in the apartment building that they had left near the hospital. And Muhammad answered the phone and he heard the guy say, his friend said, his former neighbor said, "Is there shooting up there?" Obviously they were shooting down there. And before he could answer, the phone went dead. The man had been shot by someone at the hospital, by a sniper, in his head. He'd been up on his roof, which is where you go to try to get your phone to work. His son behind him got shot also, same. The father was killed, the son was rendered paralyzed. He died when I was there, so we lived about 5 months. So this is happening throughout the north. Tulkarm refugee camp was emptied 75% now, they say. And it's going on through Nablus, through Yamon, through Tubas, through Tamon, through all the areas of the northern West Bank. But of course, that's not the whole story. This is happening throughout the West Bank. Till now, 26,000 people have been displaced. This is the big new thing they're doing, forced displacement, which is a crime against humanity. They're making people leave their villages. They're sending in their troops. The Palestinian Authority got involved in Jenin, of course. They had been sitting around and sleeping when there was fighting. Everybody made fun of them. And then the United States had an idea it would be nice if the PA got some good press, because when it came time to divide up the neighborhood, maybe the PA could have some, and the US has always been close to the PA, so that'd look good. It didn't work out. The PA didn't do a very good job, and just as people feared, the soldiers came in and took over. Turned out that most of the PA people, not many were killed, but those who were actually killed by malfunctioning their own guns. So they were kind of a loser force, which everybody knew. So 26,000 people have now been evicted from somewhere and moved somewhere else, made to flee somewhere else in the West Bank. 900 people have been killed. That's a guess. It rises every day. And the other thing, and in addition to the soldiers and in addition to the Palestinian Authority, there are the settlers. And this Settlers have always been a part of Palestinian life. In early times, when Jews first came, the settler militias were among those who came and beat them out of their homes, killed them, forced them out, killed them in places like Deir Yassin, and pushed them all south. And at that time, Palestinians had somewhere to go. But now, given the situation that I'm going to describe, they have nowhere to go. There's simply nowhere else. Before, they could go all the way down the West Bank, go into Gaza, much of Gaza. They're not born in Gaza. They came from all over the West Bank from 1948 even, when 750,000 people were exiled and many killed, and their villages destroyed. So the settlers have become an increasing terror force. Itamar Ben-Gvir has made sure that he's a cabinet member in Israel, has made sure that 27,000 automatic guns, what do you call them, machine guns, have been distributed to the settlers all over the West Bank. They already had guns. Now these settlers are different from the settlers who live in those enormous things that we call settlements, those huge mammoth buildings that are set on the top of the hills. Ever since Sharon said, go grab every hilltop, most hills in the West Bank are covered with these things, and settlers live in them. They call them settlers, and they're also protected by the military. They have a strong military presence there, so they can zoom down and do whatever they want from those settlements. But these settlers that I'm talking about and calling settlers, this new force, they're groups of individuals. Many are from the US, actually. If you hear them talk, they're speaking with American accents. And they've come, and it's like, it's great, it's free, it's the New West. They can go kill anybody they want, take whatever land they want. So all they have to do is go stick a flag somewhere, and they own the land. And the Palestinians have always been farmers and herders of sheep. So the settlers thought it'd be a good idea if they got themselves some sheep, and that way they could expand their territory without even trying. They could just say, well, this is grazing land, this is our land now, and they're doing it. But they're doing much worse. They're killing people, and they're burning their homes, and they're kicking them out of their land, and they're killing their sheep, and they're stealing other animals of theirs, and they're not allowing them to reach their fields. When harvest time comes and olives, 2,000 olives around only just one village were not able to be harvested because people beat them up, they beat them bloody, they hit them with clubs, and they shoot them. So this is a big new force, a paramilitary addition to the soldiers and what little the PA is doing. The Palestinian Authority did get rid of Al Jazeera, which was the main news service for the West Bank, so you don't hear anything about the West Bank from Al Jazeera really anymore, which is really a shame. So finally, they are putting people into smaller and smaller spaces. If I tried to push those little maps down everybody's throat when they came in, that shows what the West Bank was in 1947, and then it was at some intermediate time, and what it is now. It's little pieces of nothing. It's little pieces of living spaces surrounded by wire fences, stone walls, the 20-foot high wall that we all know about called the separation or the apartheid wall. I was in Calkilia once, and I looked out the window, and there was the wall. There's no gap between the houses and the wall. So close are they in. They bring big, huge concrete blocks and set them. They electrify fences and fence them in with iron fences, steel fences, whatever they are. And people are increasingly being rounded up and shunted into these places. Then they close the roads. And Israel takes more land by declaring more closed military area or carving access roads through the Palestinian lands so that the Jews can use these roads to get where they want and from settlement to settlement. And they've got 5 new colonies, 5 new big, built by Israel settlements in this time, since in the last 15 months. And of course, then they have to create huge buffer zones around those. All that is land taken from Palestinians. So it's a very grim story, but what's not grim is the Palestinians themselves. They're angry, and they're angry at us, finally. One man said to me, our people love peace. Yours love war. What could I say? I think he's quite right. But not many people spend any much time blaming me, though they always knew where I was from. When I was riding in a Chivvis, which is the shared taxi once years ago in Ramallah, an old woman, everybody asked me where I'm from, always, the United States. And she said, oh, Ras Al Hayya, you're from Ras Al Hayya. And that Ras is head, and Hayya is snake. So she said, that's what we used to call you. So ever after that, I said that I was from Ras Al Hayya. And actually, it's not too used anymore, so I sometimes had to explain it to people. But anyway, first of all, I wanted to say that Palestinians are extremely generous. This family that I had stayed with in 2002, who'd taken me in then, I'd lost touch with them. They'd moved and I didn't have their phone number, and so I appeared in Jenin one day without them having any idea that I was coming, and God help calling around to see, everybody knows everybody, right? And finally somebody knew somebody that knew Muhammad, and he came right away to get me, and he took me to his house, and from that moment I was treated like a member of the family. I was given everything. I was given love, I was given attention, I was given clothes that I didn't have because I hadn't brought many, and the season changed. I was fed. It was the most, by all the family, the now three teenagers, and Tahani and Muhammad. And they were begging me to stay, always. Please, just stay. Bring Pat, just stay. And I couldn't, but we all cried when I left. So generosity, and the warmth with which I was received in the camp, with people knowing where I was from, it amazed me. It amazed me every day. They also have, Palestinians have a great sense of humor, and they haven't lost it, and they never will. I called Muhammad the other day, and I was saying, are the PA really, are the Palestinian Authority really in the Muhayyam, in the camp? And he said, yes, they are, and that's because of Israel, and because of you. And I said, me? And he said, aren't you in Ras Al Hayya? So that's the kind of thing, it can get twisted around, and every night that family would sit around after dinner, and they were just in each other's company. There was nobody was on the phone, there weren't anybody visiting, they just talked. I thought that was pretty amazing. They just sat and enjoyed each other's company and got hysterical over one thing or another sometimes. And finally, they have what is called in Arabic sumud. It's translated as steadfastness, but really, steadfastness doesn't do it. they have a sense of themselves and of their place and of the land they're on that can't be shaken. I used to ask Muhammad, what's going to happen? You're going to all get taken on buses and thrown away. And he said, well, they'll put us into smaller and smaller places, and we will stay, and we will be here. And an old woman, when I was getting hysterical and asking, what's going to happen, what's going to happen? She said, I can't talk about what's going to happen. I'm too concerned with today. I don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow, and if I did, I couldn't change it. It's in the hands of God. And God and their belief in a protection, or at least a spirit that sustains them, is very strong. So that's part of the samud. And the other part is, they just don't give up, and they'll never leave their land by their choice. And if you're worried about them, then just look at Gaza and watch the 500,000 people walking along that shoreline, making their way north, the ones who had their homes in the north and who got thrown away 1,000,000 times, different places. They're all walking. They know there's no home for them. And when they get there, they sit down on their rubble and they start moving it. They aren't allowed to have any heavy equipment, so the old hands are doing the work, pulling the concrete. They will never give up, so they'll be fine. Thanks.